Hi, and welcome to Learning Web Designs and Security with FixitGearWare Security. In this section of the Web Development channel, we will be teaching you everything you need to know about web development and security implementations, right from the foundations of web application building. A brief introduction of what you're going to be learning today. In this first episode, you would be learning the following: the misconception of basic terminology such as web, website, and web applications, and the differences between these various terminologies and words that are commonly used in our day-to-day lives. After that, we're moving on to explaining the various categories of web applications and how they are classified based on the services and functionalities they provide. After explaining these various categories, we would move on to explain the various terms such as FaaS, known as Function as a Service, IaaS, known as Infrastructure as a Service, PaaS, known as Platform as a Service, and SaaS, known as Software as a Service, as they are the various categories out there. Once we're done with these categories, we'll be breaking it further in a very simple manner or form whereby you as an individual or a novice will understand how you can spot the difference between these various categories based on specific key functionalities they provide that can make you understand what type of applications you might end up wanting to build in the future for others to use as well. Upon concluding that, we will now summarize the whole subject matter which we have discussed today as a way of making you appreciate all you've learned based on what we have taught you today. We all know that every day we use the word web or website and web applications, though they have the same initialization of spelling, which is using the WE, but they do not mean the same thing. So what is a web? From our own definitions at FixitGearWare Security, we define a web as a collection of informations such as good contents, rated contents, data, private and public, articles, blogs, websites, web applications, and so on, from legitimate and non-legitimate organizations, from a safe internet and unsafe internet, which is also known as the dark web, and so on, that is accessible by everyone or anyone with an internet connection. So basically, the web is also classified as the internet. Let's just put it this way, like it's the galaxy, where we have different planetary bodies such as Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and so on, including Earth, and a series of meteorites, and also the stars and the moons and so on, right? So these are like various information existing in a wide space. So these informations can now be accessible based on the individual who is trying to access these various data or informations out there, as long as they have an access to an internet or an internet connection. So the web in general basically is like space comprising of multiple informations, be it good, be it bad, be it negative, or be it positive information. It's all out there in the web. So whatever it is that you're looking for, you would always get it in the web. Now let's move on to explaining a website and a web application. So from the concept of website and web application, what is a website? Now, we have listed a brief information on how you can identify or differentiate a website from a web application. So for a website, we consider a website as a collection of informations and images that talks about what you do and what your business is all about. They are also based on services that you offer and the entire team that are part of your organization. So these contents can be publications about milestones based on what you've done so far as an organization since the era of your existence. They can also be events or even research your business conducts. Furthermore, if you want to understand how a website is, when you navigate to a website, let's say, for example, FixitGearWare.com, You could see informations like contact information. Most organizations will also have their physical office address on their website, or even a contact form, which makes it easy for you to communicate with them. Furthermore, other organizations that have been in the business for quite some time will also display a phone number, which is a way of you to reach out to them over a voice call if you think you have information that are urgent that you want to pass to them. And others have what we call a chat or a messenger that serves as a bot or a real-time message application. So these are a way of you to reach out to them by leaving a message or by contacting them by filling some short forms within that chat applications. Other information you can also find on a website can be a fiscal report. So fiscal report here means like, let's say an organization that deals on sales and services. They can always want to talk about their turnovers to the general public in case they have people who are interested in investing in them as a form of transparency, for them to be aware of what the business is all about and how they've been making returns and sales over the years of their existence. While it is a website must have a login portal. So you might ask, why is it necessary? Basically, the login portal serves as a door to the back end of the website, either by an administrator of the website or the developer of the website. Additional functionalities you can find on a website include merchants. So merchants here, we're talking about if the organization accepts payments for services using various platforms, they can also list them there for you to be aware of this information. But in case you fall across false informations that might tell you to make payments, which are not the legitimized organizations that are involved with this organization in terms of processing payment plans and so on. Other organizations can also extend on their website customer feedback forms, which the customer has to feedback their grievances or their experience using their services. And lastly, not to forget that every website mostly have a blog. So the blog is about research also as well, or publications about what they are doing in terms of new research or discoveries, or even future predictions of what they want to do in their organization. So when you now look at these characteristics on how we have classified a website, you can see that the website is like a personal business journal. So we categorize that as a personal business journal in the sense that when we're all little kids, we always have these private books where we pen down our thoughts, we write everything we feel, but this is only accessible by us, and sometimes we share with our parents that we trust or our best friends. So not everyone can access this book, like your classmates, or let's say your casual friends who are not your best friend. But your best friends and maybe your mom or your dad whom you trust, you always reveal this diary or personal journal to them. Now, let's now understand what a web application is all about and how it is different from a website. For a web application, they are mostly used by banks, social networks, organizations that provide tooling, and even the medical field. So when we talk about organizations that provide tooling, for example, from a cybersecurity perspective, we have Shodan, which is a kind of an online repository that collects information of vulnerable applications or websites that have sensitive data exposed across the internet. So that can be considered as a web application because it's not just for the existence of the organization itself, but has also plausible information that can be accessed by other users who are registered or who are guests of that platform, which is being owned by the owner of that web application. In this case, Shodan.io. Now, furthermore, for web application, it uses or consumes a lot of resource. So when we talk about resource here, we're talking about hosting the web application, the server's computation, and of course, maintaining that web application. Because one thing is building a web application. Another factor is what? Trying to maintain it. So when we talk about maintenance here, what do we mean by maintenance? So for example, you develop an application. where users can, perform some functionalities such as interact with one another, or let's say chat with one another. For example, we have X, formerly known as Twitter. And in the course of that existence, some component of that application itself are vulnerable based on the code that was used in building that application. So what is going to be the problem? If that application is not maintained over time, it means it's vulnerable to external security researchers or malicious hackers who can now take advantage of these applications and, of course, exploit them to obtain sensitive information such as users' data or payment card information and so on. Furthermore, for a web application, it requires more and advanced security. For a website based on the organization's business dealings, it might not necessarily need enhanced security. For example, let's say you're just a blogger who wrote a blog to publish content or news. There is nothing to lose because you do not have users' registration information. It's just a plain blog that publishes information, right? And so even if it's exploited, there is no data that can be taken advantage of by the malicious hacker who exploited that website. But for web applications, because of the nature of the services they offer or provide, it is very dangerous if there is a lapse in security. Because once that web application is exploited, we're not talking about compromising the organization itself. We're also talking about compromising users and customers who are using that web application that was developed by the organization. So in that case, to prevent such compromise or to ensure that the web application is always secure and safe, there is always a need for more and enhanced security. Furthermore, on web application, most web application comprises of multiple APIs, calling, and functionalities. So let's say you have your medical doctor who is your family doctor, right? But he works for a federal medical center or a reputable organization that has a medical web application. So it means that everything you need to do, such as booking of appointments, checking of your medical results, making payments online, and of course, checking on the availability of doctors that you would want to meet one-on-one for consultations, right? You have to do it over the web. So all these functionalities requires a lot of application programming interface. Okay, so there might be third-party APIs that are able to execute these functionalities, which of course was integrated by the designer of that medical firm's web application. On that aspect, a web application is more complicated based on the functionality it provides compared to a website. The last part of a web application is that you could integrate it or it is being integrated into a third-party software. So, for example, let's say we have Stripe, which is a payment platform that processes payments, right? So if I'm building a web application using Laravel, I could get the API functionalities that process payment from Stripe. And that's, of course, is based on subscription, on the number of usage, right? And I'll integrate it as a standalone on my web application. So whenever a user makes a purchase on my application, which is probably maybe a web application that offers a subscription model, each time they subscribe, the API call of Stripe that was integrated into that Laravel application would process the payment and of course pass it on to Stripe to do the debiting. But on my web application, I am the one who is manually implementing the fee or the pricing which my web application charges. So having defined what a web application is, we can look at it as a multi-purpose library. So when you go to a library, you see a collection of books. And what is this collection of books? It can be fiction, it can be science, it could even be a cybersecurity book, or even a cookbook, or a storytelling book. And of course, in a multi-purpose library, there are a lot of users coming in to either read or borrow these books. So when you build a web application, you're not just building to talk about your organization, but you're also providing services on that same web application, which comprises of various users from different geo-locations. And that is how you can classify a web application as a multi-purpose library when compared to a website, which is a personal journal for business. Now, let's now categorize web application based on their service. There are 4 major categories of service. We have the FaaS, which is known as Function as a Service. We have the IaaS, which is known as Infrastructure as a Service. And we have PaaS, which is also known as Platform as a Service. And lastly, we have SaaS, which is also known as Software as a Service. Now, under Function as a Service, these are basically services that are standalone that can process or execute processes without you being physically present. So, for example, AWS Lambda is an example of a function as a service. So you can run some series of codes that executes automation processes based on the specification of your code, which you have integrated into Lambda. Let's say you process a code to audit your web application for security reasons. Lambda is going to be running those codes and, of course, generating this report on the back end to you, who is the administrator of that specific application that you're implementing Lambda on. Examples of PaaS are like Azure Cloud Functions, Azure Functions, Oracle Cloud Functions, and so on. Now, if we move on to IaaS, Infrastructure as a Service, they provide their infrastructures for usage. So what are these infrastructures? Basically, these infrastructures are like, let's say you want a specification of a CPU of over, let's say, 2 GB RAM and 2.1 gigahertz processing speed, and of course, of a physical storage of about 20 GB. When you specify this, these organizations that provide the services would on-premise, which of course to you is a cloud service, but to them it's on their own premise, would install or make provision of this infrastructure for you, and of course comes with a fee and based on the business model of that organization. So once they now provide this infrastructure, whatever you want to use it for based on type of services this infrastructure offers, you are now able to use it. Example of those services are like Linode. So Linode, we all know you can host your VM machines for penetration testers. So when you host your VM on Linode, you can now remotely connect by getting the IP of that VM running on Linode, and of course, trying to practice your various penetration testing skills. Hosting companies can also be considered as IaaS because most hosting companies provide virtual private servers, which of course is based on specifications on the customer's demand. So if you as a customer, you have a specific demand that you want that your VPS server to be, you just have to specify it, and these hosting companies will provide them. Now, on Platform as a Service, we're talking about platforms that are able to provide services for you to run various applications. So, for example, we have the Azure, we have the IBM Cloud, the Oracle Cloud, and the Amazon Web Services. And of course, we know that GitHub also serves as Platform as a Service. How can you now identify a Platform as a Service? For example, Google Engine allows you to run your applications or your web applications on them. So basically, they provide services that are able to, use their platform. But in this case, not like IaaS, okay? So when you talk about infrastructure and platform, these are two different things. And of course, they are quite complicated or confusing when you try to identify them. But in the next chapter, we'll be explaining to you how you can differentiate between IaaS and PaaS so that you do not get confused each time you're trying to explain both to someone else. Now, lastly, on software as a service. For software as a service, they are basically social networks, payment processing platforms, and so on. So in this category, we have Stripe, we have PayPal, we have ServiceNow, we have WooCommerce, we have Jira, we have Zohodex, and of course, GitHub can also serve as software as a service. where you can, of course, store your codes or your repositories. Now, let's now move on to explaining this to even a novice so that you can be able to differentiate this based on the services they provide. Now, for function as a service, the services they provide is able to perform automated processes such as data collections and recognizance from a cybersecurity perspective and auditing. So let's say we have a series of code we want Lambda to run each time to retrieve information about a target. We can actually run that on Lambda, and based on the timing we've specified, Lambda will be running that code without us being physically present. And of course, that's a function executing on its own without the need of you being there to manually conduct those actions. So it's considered an automated process. Now for IaaS provides specification services for hosting of website and web applications, including VM machines, known as the VMware. Like we previously mentioned, Linode is an example of IaaS. So they provide the specifications for you. Then you decide to host whatever virtual machines you want. Is it Linux? Is it Windows? You just have to provide the specification. And of course, they're going to run it up for you and set it up for you to use. Now, one distinguishing factor that you can easily identify or differentiate IaaS from PaaS is that multipurpose platforms are considered IaaS. Okay? For example, AWS S3, which is the AWS bucket, it's not only providing the functionality for you to, store your images or documents. You can also host a website using the S3 bucket. You're very familiar with the availability zones, like the zoning services that are provided by AWS, and how you can provision your website in these various availability zones. You would understand that users are able to deploy their website using S3 and of course pushing this website on various availability zones using what we call load balancing. So load balancing is like, let's say if you are accessing the website from a specific availability zones and it's overcrowded or overused, then load balancing will push or redirect the traffic to the next availability zones. Now, for platform as a service, strictly they provide containerization services. So, for example, Amazon Web Services also provides a platform for you to host or deploy containers. These containers, basically, you just deploy them and manage them from there. They don't really allow you to host like a VM or something like that. It's just at that specific aspect of a platform as a service, they just allow you to deploy or manage your website or web applications. So differentiating that from IaaS, you can see that IaaS is not just about providing for storage, but also you're able to give specifications of what you want. Okay. And the infrastructure will provide it for you. Whereas platform as a service is just basically they give you this platform, you do whatever you want, and at the end of the month, they charge you. Okay. Now, for software as a service, can consider them as providing billing services, social network sites like LinkedIn, X, Facebook. Basically, they are software and they provide services such as blog-related services where you can post your thoughts, your ideologies. You can also interact with other users of the platforms and as well share expressions via likes and comments, or even reposting or sharing their contents. Okay. On the other hand, software as a service can also be such as storage. Yes, iCloud can also be considered as software as a service. Okay. So now let's now differentiate between PaaS and SaaS. If you look at PaaS, previously we said Google Cloud can be considered as platform as a service because Google also has a preference where you can host a website. Okay. But for software as a service, basically you just use them based on the services this software provides. You're not able to like host a website on them. You're not able to build a website on them. And of course, you're not able to do anything outside the services which they provide. So once again, for FaaS, anything that's able to allow you to run automation processes, and of course, without your presence, using an organization's infrastructure is known as FaaS. And for IaaS, if you're able to specify what you need and allow the organization to set up the infrastructure for you, that is considered as IaaS. For PaaS, you're able to use the organization's platform to deploy or run your containers without the need of you hosting or creating your own platform to be able to run these applications. While for software as a service, you're able to use them for billing purposes or interaction without the need or the possibility of you hosting your own application on these platforms that provide SaaS. So rounding up this today, in summary, you've been able to understand the difference between a website, and a web application. You've also been able to understand what makes up a website and a web application. And of course, understanding FaaS, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. And with that, we have come to an end of this week's episode and the first episode of Web Application Development and Security with FixitGearWare Security. Thanks for listening and see you next time. Bye for now.